Hi there, my name is Kirsty Crawford. I work for TCV, the Conservation Volunteers and Environmental Charity, who have two projects that I will be speaking about today. These are citizen science engagement projects, one on hoverflies and one on hedgehogs, with varying levels of participation and success amongst our target audience of children and young people. So the definition that we take to mean citizen science is about everyone from school children, beginners, experts, volunteer groups, community groups that already exist, about them getting involved in science. So we strongly identify with definition number 2 on the list, the engagement of the community to take part in science. We want to foster a sense of place, a sense of belonging, and localise the projects we do. So we align these two aims with citizen science, one to connect people with nature and two to deliver healthier, happier communities, as is the TCV ethos. We have 4 outcomes that we deliver on. So every project that we do has to be centred around 1, health and well-being, 2, community, 3, learning and skills, and 4, the environment. We need to show tangible change in these areas, and our citizen science branch sits right at the heart of this. So with HogWatch Scotland, our hedgehog conservation project, and HoverSpotters, our hoverfly monitoring project for beginners, those 4 outcomes are also at the heart. This is through Scotland Counts, our 12-year multi-partner funded project to provide every community in Scotland skills and training necessary to understand and carry out citizen science. And we follow the ethos that people care about what they know, quite simply. So 1, we need to give the knowledge around the subject area, and then 2, we train with the tools and the skills to be able to make a tangible difference in the environment. So to HogWatch Scotland, the photos here show the many very wonderful outcomes that we get to deliver on this project, from working with schools to adult volunteers, training courses, different surveys using mammal footprint tunnels, taking teams of volunteers out at all times through the night to survey for hedgehogs. The reason that it came about, the request for this project, was it's a real lack of conservation-specific projects focusing on hedgehogs in Scotland. In our target area around Glasgow city centre, there were 72 records on the NBN, the National Biodiversity Network Atlas, for the last 30 years. So a real poor recording effort, a lack of awareness of that we need to be recording even perceived common species that were of least concern but were declining nonetheless. This was timely. In the summer of this year, the hedgehog was moved to the category of vulnerable on the red list for Britain's mammals, suffering nearly 50% decline since 2008. So we pitched this just right, and we're in a good position to campaign for further levels of protection. To take part, to do the citizen science part of this project, there was 3 levels, both contributing and collaborative. So either to do ad hoc monitoring, emailing your sightings, to build up our data collection and share it with the relevant organisations that you can see here on the map, to do spotlighting in-person nocturnal surveys, so using powerful torchlight to search for hedgehogs, tag them, weigh them, monitor them in future, and to use small mammal footprint tunnels in your own local area. So this part was through HogWatch at Home, which is funded by the British Ecological Society's Digital Engagement Fund. It was in the height of lockdown. It was an engagement project that we would provide all equipment necessary to monitor wildlife in your own garden, to involve children with a suite of lessons, and also, crucially, to survey for presence and absence of hedgehogs. So we provide all equipment. We could give you trail cameras if necessary. So it was a real kind of collaborative approach to monitoring in your own space. Crucially, though, citizen science for children, the HogWatch took the form of 3 classroom packages: surveying, doing surveys of the school grounds to look for hazards, creating an action plan, giving responsibility back to the children. So we visited 3 times to 5 schools in different areas across Glasgow. We centred these projects very strongly around the children's own community. So the school was put at the heart. The focus is in a topic that's taken place in their own backyard, which is really important to allow science to become relevant to their own situation. This was partly a co-created project. So the action plan that you can see here, the 4 stages, the children completely made this up with minimal guidance and adult influence. These were 4 steps that they wanted to take, with the ultimate aim of surveying for hedgehogs and encouraging more presence of hedgehog populations in their school grounds. They went on to deliver on monitoring actions, and then also to plant up hedgerow habitat and do further practical conservation actions for hedgehogs. You can see that it really took off on social media. So not just in school time, but also rippling through the adult community, adults talking to their friends, coming on board as volunteers themselves, posters designed around the neighbourhood and put up Housing developers campaigned and visited by the school children to try and campaign for hedgehog highways and gaps to be made in fences. So lots was starting to take off, and also in the media it was a real kind of win, and it was easy to generate some interest in the local area. The methods that we used were linking with strong partners. We had the backing of our funder, the British Hedgehog Preservation Society, but with such links we really became part of a sort of community of citizen science projects that were all working towards one common aim. We also found it timely to have good dialogue with local councils, hedgehogs being a priority species in local biodiversity action plans. So we were able to really show our influence there. Through social media, word spread like wildfire. We were inundated with requests. It's the most positive and most sort of requested citizen science project we've ever put on. And partly this was due to multi-level engagement. So there was many different levels that you could come in at. And we usually found that because we had such a personal dialogue, sightings were emailed into our project officers, and then we always sent a thorough reply and really tried to get that dialogue going, that people inevitably ended up moving through the stages and participating further in the project. So much so that we ended up with 330 sightings, a very strong amount through the central belt of Scotland. Like you can see, we had a core team of 102 volunteers, 6 nocturnal spotlighting surveys, 51 hedgehog champions taking it to the next level, and 115 mammal tunnels distributed throughout the whole of Scotland with very strong positive results. We worked with 8 schools who campaigned tirelessly to councils and local developers. We planted 100 new metres of hedgerow habitat. We fostered strong parent-teacher-child relationships who took ownership of the citizen science element of this project together. So we found that hedgehogs, we knew mammals were a charismatic species, but the hook and the drive forward was massive. Moving into lockdown, we had online training courses that were fully booked, 400 participants, 50 people a piece on the waiting list each time. In real life or in person, we could only target 25, so we had a huge reach. But the data that we really need, such as tangible impacts in climate change and on habitat changes over a long period of time that would be more beneficial longer term to us, it was harder to access. But we've put ourselves in a good position by starting off with a small sort of contributory citizen science project with ad hoc sightings, building up trust in a sort of volunteer base to put us in a really good position for the future, and crucially gave us leverage for that ultimate higher aim of campaigning for more protection of hedgehogs, so going from a Schedule 6 to a Schedule 5 species, which would also give them protection for their nesting sites as well. It was a real community-orientated project. We saw the community want to take community litter picks forward, have themed awareness days for hedgehogs, take little mini pilot projects off in their own direction that all fell under the ultimate citizen science project, HogWatch Scotland. So we've got lots of offshoots and pilots coming from that for the community, which is great. The second is HoverSpotters. So it was after this question: can children collect scientific data, and if so, how well and to what standard, and also what were the human implications of this? We wanted to understand not just about education and outreach, but bridging the gap between scientists and citizen science going into schools and communities. It was delivered and designed through the full school closure period in the UK, so throughout May to September when most schools were shut. So tapping into how do we incorporate citizen science into homeschooling as well. We did experience the trade-off that the more the students benefited, the less the scientific aims were kind of met, and it was to what end were we prepared to level off that trade-off. This project was supported by Buglife, Nature.Scot, and also formed part of my MSc dissertation research. Hoverflies as a species, they were selected for their educational value to talk about pollination because they're so vastly misunderstood, with Batesian mimicry, the black and yellow stripe pattern, making them very easily mistakable for wasps, and not just among children, but adults as well, we found were frequently misunderstanding and misrepresenting information about hoverflies as a species. They're also a highly important biological indicator species. So the more we know about them, the more we're able to collect data, then the greater value that will have for us. From the over 280 species of hoverfly in the UK, 4 were selected here: marmalade, tiger, hockey stick, and Batman. So we're given these names that are easily identifiable for the children, and we also, in the educational kind of worksheets, tied it up as hoverfly heroes. So giving them a character, giving them superhero qualities, Our target age range was 8 to 12-year-olds, and we really wanted to understand, by taking part in this online activity during the period of homeschooling, what were the impacts both on the connection to nature within children and their contribution to scientific data collection itself. So there were 7 elements to design, all to facilitate science online, which in itself is no easy task. So from the website, the 3 questionnaires, both pre and post activity, a 10-minute video for YouTube, and of course some actual physical copies as well. So these could be sent out to anyone that wanted to participate. We're not asking people to have a printer at home necessarily, a recording sheet, an ID guide, and also a worksheet to try and bridge the gap between me, a stranger online, asking what would be about 1 hour's worth of participation from children, to understanding the complex topic, having it in front of them and trying to do some tasks before they then step out into the garden, start monitoring hoverflies. We used the Connection to Nature Index, the CNI, to measure wellbeing outcomes. So this is developed 10 years ago by Cheng and Monroe, and it uses 4 categories that you can see on the left-hand side to try and measure connection to nature over time. So children took part in this both before, during the main activity, going outside and monitoring hoverflies, and then 3 to 5 days after. And they had to identify with statements such as, being in the natural environment makes me feel peaceful, and my actions will make the natural world difference. They had to identify how much they felt they affiliated with those statements. And the 0 bar going along the horizontal axis shows that overall there was mostly no change, but the blue bar representing those children that had a strong jump positively after taking part. They felt that they identified much more strongly with many of the categories, and sense of responsibility, number 4, saw the biggest positive shift, which I'll talk about in a minute. So our methods were different. Social media, we were targeting groups. I was using the 30 Days Wild Facebook group, which in itself invites some bias. So we tried to counter that by not only speaking to people that already were interested in the natural environment, but linking up with primary schools in urban, slightly more deprived areas, and trying to get a partnership with them to deliver this throughout lockdown as well. Again, localised ethos, really important. We centre it literally, practically in a child's back garden to bring the element of science home. And we also wanted to foster a child and adult relationship, that home learning is a 2-way partnership, and that if we want to have positive exposure to the environment, it needs to start in the home, and encouraging partnership learning between adult and child is the first stage in fostering positive attitudes towards the natural world, which was one of our outcomes. So we had 34 participants overall. Ironically, most came from England in the end, even though it was a Scotland specific project, through the word of mouth and the power of social media. So we had 245 initial requests, which boiled down to 85 people actually taking the time to click through to the instructional YouTube video. 100 people begun the first stage, which was a pre-activity questionnaire for the children to answer. 30% drop-off rate here, so 70 people actually got to the end of that, answering all 15 questions. And from 70, we went to 34 people who actually went out into the garden, completed the task, and then done the final stage of the post-activity questionnaire as well. So what we noticed was that the age range fluctuated. 6 to 13-year-olds actually took part, not 8 to 12-year-olds, but most did notice more invertebrates after taking part. They had a higher awareness of the natural world around them, and their perception of hoverflies increased dramatically as well. So they were asked how they identified with certain species by being shown images, and the hoverfly had an 85% positive shift. 11% positive increase on the sense of environmental and stewardship and responsibility. So children felt that their actions could actually make a difference to the environment after taking part in this citizen science task. We had 40 records, 31 were able to be used and verified. Half of these were incorrect, but the biggest proportion that were correct were of the marmalade hoverfly, which is the most common species in the UK. So the outcomes here were that we had 78%, majority of participants coming from the 50% least deprived areas of the UK. To try and combat this, we'd like to link with fair technology access schemes, things like free iPads across primary schools in the UK. Online citizen science did fall short compared to similar programmes where you'd be studying the topic online, but to combat this, we want to introduce live sessions. So get rid of the YouTube video and do engaging in-person sessions where trust and confidence can be strengthened between scientist and participant. The most heartening thing to see was the feedback. So my daughter found it useful and is identifying them most days. One landed on my youngest. He would normally been scared, but realised it was a hoverfly and carried on. So the human impact was undoubtedly greater than the scientific benefits that we saw. But in this instance, for such a strong community-focused project and a home learning project that was taking place in the economic climate that it did, it was a very strong result for us. It was a learning process between adult and child. It made a huge difference in knowledge gaps of hoverflies as a species, and it did provide us with 31 usable records, which were of a quality to be uploaded to the NBN gateway. So to finish, broader benefits far outweighed scientific benefits. Meaningful connection to the natural world by inherently targeting children's innate nature of being inquisitive and sort of exploratory orientated and wanting to collect data and wanting to be task orientated. We did witness the trade-off, but orientation of these projects within the community gave a much stronger sense of responsibility than if you were trying to orientate it without that sense of place or belonging. So community-focused projects and partnership working were what worked for TCVA in our delivery of these two citizen science projects. And we hope to see this level continue. Some references which have been used throughout the presentation and my contact details. Hedgehogs are still very much an active project, so if you would like to collaborate, do get in touch. We're active on social media. I'm on WorldScot Place and TCV are on the links provided. Thank you very much for listening.